Marcus woke up before the sun had even touched the sky. The small alarm clock on his nightstand buzzed quietly, and without hesitation he turned it off before it could wake his little daughter, Alina, who was still sleeping peacefully in the other room. He lay there for a moment, staring at the ceiling of his modest apartment, thinking about the long day ahead. Life was not easy for him as a single father, but it was a life he had chosen to live with pride and determination. The room was dim, and the only light came from the street lamps outside the window. Marcus quietly swung his legs off the bed and stretched his tired body. His work as a janitor demanded both strength and patience. It was not the most glamorous job, but he carried it out with a sense of duty. For Marcus, it was not just about sweeping floors or emptying trash bins, it was about giving his daughter a chance to live a better life than he had. He tiptoed into the small kitchen and began preparing breakfast. The fridge held only a few essentials: milk, eggs, bread, and some fruit, but he made the best of it. He scrambled an egg and toasted bread, making sure to set aside a small plate for Alina to eat when she woke up. He couldn't help but smile when he thought of her bright smile and curious questions. At only 7 years old, she was his entire world. After packing her school lunch, Marcus peeked into her room. She was curled up under a blanket, her soft curls spread across the pillow, her teddy bear tucked under her arm. He whispered softly, "Daddy's going to work now, sweetheart. I'll see you tonight." Even though she didn't hear him, saying those words gave him strength. Marcus slipped into his uniform: dark pants, a simple polo shirt with the company's logo embroidered on the chest, and sturdy shoes. The clothes were plain, but he wore them neatly. He believed that no matter the job, one should take pride in how they carried themselves. He grabbed his old backpack, locked the apartment door, and stepped into the cool morning air. The bus ride to the city was quiet. Most of the passengers were half asleep, holding onto their coffee cups and scrolling through their phones. Marcus sat by the window, watching the buildings pass by, thinking about the day ahead. He worked at a large corporate office tower downtown, a place filled with polished glass walls, busy executives, and endless meetings. It was a world far removed from his own, yet he had become a part of it in his own way. When he arrived at the building, the sun was just beginning to rise. The golden light reflected off the tall glass windows, making the tower look like it was glowing. Marcus swiped his ID card at the side entrance, the one used by staff, and entered quietly. The lobby was still empty at that hour. He enjoyed those early moments when the halls were silent, and the only sound was the echo of his footsteps on the clean marble floor. He began his routine with practiced rhythm. First, he checked the conference rooms, straightening chairs and wiping down tables. Then he moved to the hallways, polishing floors until they gleamed. His movements were steady and careful, almost like a dance. Though no one noticed, he paid attention to every detail. He knew the executives who walked these halls rarely thought about who kept everything in order, but Marcus did not work for recognition. He worked because it mattered to him to do things right. As the morning wore on, the building began to wake up. Employees arrived with their coffee cups, their voices filling the space with energy. Most passed by Marcus without a word, some offering a polite nod. A few smiled and greeted him by name, and those small gestures meant more to him than they probably realized. He was invisible to most, but those who took a moment to acknowledge him always lifted his spirits. In the middle of his shift, Marcus paused by the break room to refill his mop bucket. He overheard a group of interns chatting about their projects and laughing about their busy schedules. Their excitement reminded him of his younger days when he too had big dreams. Life had taken him on a different path, one filled with challenges he hadn't planned for. Still, he did not allow regret to weigh him down. He thought about Alina's future, her education, her dreams, and reminded himself that his sacrifices were not in vain. During lunch break, Marcus sat alone in a quiet corner of the building with his homemade sandwich. He watched people rush in and out of the cafeteria, their designer suits and expensive shoes a sharp contrast to his simple clothes. For some, the building was a stepping stone to bigger careers. For Marcus, it was a steady income, a safe routine, and a place that allowed him to care for his daughter. He often wondered if anyone knew his story or if they ever thought about the man pushing the mop or carrying trash bags late at night. But Marcus never complained. He carried himself with quiet dignity, always ready to help others with small acts of kindness. If someone spilled coffee, he would be there before they even asked. If an employee dropped their keys, he would pick them up with a smile. He believed that kindness, no matter how small, could make a difference in someone's day. That particular morning, as Marcus moved toward the parking lot area to check on the bins outside, he couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. It wasn't unusual. Sometimes early arrivals noticed him at work and stared curiously at the janitor who seemed so focused. But Marcus paid little attention to it and kept moving. He had learned long ago not to worry about how others saw him. Inside, the CEO of the company had arrived early for an important meeting. He passed by the spotless lobby and nodded briefly at Marcus, though not stopping to speak. To the CEO, Marcus was just another worker keeping the building running smoothly. He had no idea that within a few hours, this quiet janitor would do something that would leave the entire company speechless. For now, Marcus simply carried on with his duties, his mind on Alina's smile, her school projects, and the promise he had made to himself years ago, to give her the best life he possibly could. Every sweep of the broom, every polished corner, every quiet morning was part of that promise. And though the world around him barely noticed, Marcus was living his story with courage, patience, and love. The afternoon sun was bright, pouring golden light over the tall corporate tower. By now, the offices were buzzing with activity. Phones rang, keyboards clicked, and employees hurried from one meeting to the next. Marcus, dressed in his plain uniform, moved quietly through the building, pushing his cart filled with cleaning supplies. To many, he was just part of the background, someone who kept things tidy while the real business took place. But Marcus did not mind. He was used to blending in, focusing on his work, and taking pride in every task he completed. After finishing his duties inside, Marcus stepped out toward the back lot to empty some bins. The parking area stretched wide, filled with sleek cars lined in neat rows. The quiet air outside was a refreshing break from the constant hum inside the building. He leaned his mop against the wall and bent down to tie the loose lace on his worn-out shoe. As he straightened up, his eyes caught movement near the far end of the lot. A black SUV had rolled in slowly, its dark windows hiding whoever sat inside. At first, Marcus thought nothing of it. Cars came and went all day, and many of the higher executives preferred larger vehicles. But something about the way the SUV lingered caught his attention. It wasn't pulling into a parking space. Instead, it slowed down beside a small group of young employees walking together. Marcus squinted, shading his eyes against the sun. He recognized the group, several new interns who had started only a week ago. They were laughing, chatting about their projects, their voices echoing faintly across the lot. The SUV stopped right beside them, and the window on the passenger side rolled down halfway. A man inside leaned out slightly and called one of the interns by name. The young woman paused, surprised. Her friends turned to look, and a hush fell over their laughter. She stepped closer to the SUV, confusion on her face. Marcus felt a sudden twist in his stomach. He had never seen that man before, and from the way the intern's expression shifted, it didn't seem like she recognized him either. Why would she walk toward the car? Marcus thought, his heart beginning to pound. He had learned long ago to trust his instincts. Being a single father had sharpened them. He had trained himself to always notice details, shifts in tone, changes in body language, little signs others might ignore. Right now, every fiber of his being was telling him something was wrong. The intern's hand hovered near the door handle, as if she was about to open it. Without thinking, Marcus dropped the trash bag he was holding and stepped forward. His voice carried across the lot, strong and urgent, louder than he had ever spoken at work before. "Don't get in the car," he shouted. The sound startled everyone. The group of interns turned, their eyes wide. The young woman froze, her hands still in the air. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. The man in the SUV glanced toward Marcus, his face shadowed by the dark glass. Then, almost as quickly as it had appeared, the SUV sped away, its tires whispering against the pavement before disappearing down the street. The interns stood in shock, unsure what had just happened. Some looked at Marcus, their expressions mixed with confusion and surprise. One of them whispered, "Why would he yell like that?" Another murmured, "Did he know that guy?" The young woman who had nearly stepped into the SUV looked shaken, clutching her bag close to her chest. Marcus walked closer, his breathing heavy from the rush of adrenaline. "Are you all right?" he asked gently, his voice softer now. The young woman nodded slowly, still processing what had just happened. "I didn't know him," she admitted after a pause. "He just called my name. I thought maybe he was from the office, but I've never seen him before." Marcus felt a chill run through him. "If you didn't know him," he said firmly, "then you did the right thing by not getting in. Sometimes, when something feels wrong, it is wrong." The interns looked at one another, realizing the seriousness of the moment. What had felt like an ordinary walk across the lot had nearly turned into something much darker. They had been too caught up in their conversation to notice. It was Marcus, the janitor no one usually paid much attention to, who had seen the danger first. From the far end of the lot, footsteps echoed. The CEO, who had come outside for a quick call, had witnessed part of the scene. He walked toward the group, his expression unreadable. The interns quickly straightened, nervous in his presence. He was a man of authority, respected and sometimes feared for his sharp decisions and high standards. "What happened here?" he asked, his eyes moving from the shaken intern to Marcus. For a moment, silence hung in the air. Then one of the interns spoke, explaining in a trembling voice what had occurred. She pointed to Marcus, saying, "He stopped her." He yelled before she could get into the car. The CEO turned his gaze to Marcus, studying him closely. Marcus felt a wave of unease wash over him. He had only acted on instinct. He had not thought about how it might look yelling across the parking lot, drawing attention to himself. What if people thought he had overreacted? What if they questioned his judgment? But the CEO didn't say anything at first. Instead, he turned back to the intern and asked, "Did you know that man?" "No, sir," she replied quietly, shaking her head. "I don't know him at all." The CEO's expression hardened, though not in anger. It was a look of concern. He glanced once more at Marcus, and though he said nothing, there was a flicker of something unexpected in his eyes. Respect. The group began to scatter, still murmuring about the strange event. The young woman thanked Marcus softly, her voice trembling. "I think you might have just saved me," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. Marcus gave her a reassuring nod but said little. He didn't want to make a scene or appear like a hero. To him, it had simply been the right thing to do. He knew what it meant to be responsible for someone's safety, to act without hesitation when it mattered most. As he returned to his cart, his hands still trembling slightly, Marcus felt the weight of the moment sink in. He had never wanted to draw attention to himself. He had always been content to stay in the background, working quietly, unnoticed. But today was different. Today, his voice had broken the silence, and people had listened. What Marcus didn't know was that this single act, the warning shouted from across the lot, was about to change how the entire company saw him. And what the CEO would do next would leave everyone astonished. The atmosphere in the parking lot was tense after the black SUV disappeared. The young interns were still whispering to one another, their faces pale with worry. The girl who had almost stepped into the car clutched her bag tightly, her hands shaking. She kept replaying the moment in her mind, realizing how close she had come to making a mistake. Marcus's voice, firm and protective, still echoed in her ears. The CEO stood among them, silent for a moment, his eyes fixed on Marcus. He was a man known for his sharp mind, always quick to make decisions, but in this moment, he seemed deep in thought. It wasn't every day that a janitor interrupted the flow of his company's morning routine, and certainly not in a way that had gathered a small crowd. "Everyone, head back inside," the CEO said finally, his tone calm but commanding. The interns nodded quickly, eager to escape the uneasy silence. The young woman looked back at Marcus one last time before following her colleagues inside. Her eyes carried a mixture of gratitude and disbelief. Marcus remained standing by his cart, unsure of what to do next. He wasn't a man who enjoyed attention, and now all eyes seemed to be on him. He had acted out of instinct, not for recognition, but it seemed his actions had stirred something far greater than he expected. The CEO walked closer, his polished shoes clicking against the pavement. He stopped just a few feet away from Marcus and asked in a steady voice, "What exactly did you see?" Marcus swallowed hard. Speaking to the CEO always felt intimidating. He lowered his eyes respectfully and explained, "I saw the car slow down. The driver called her by name, but she didn't look like she knew him. When she reached for the door, I just knew something wasn't right. I told her not to get in." There was no pride in his words, only honesty. Marcus didn't dress his story up, didn't try to make himself sound brave. He simply told the truth. The CEO studied him carefully, his face unreadable. Finally, he gave a slight nod. "You did the right thing," he said, his tone softer now. "Very few people would have acted as quickly as you did." Marcus nodded quietly, unsure how to respond. He wanted to return to his work, to disappear into the background again, but he could sense this was only the beginning of something larger. Later that afternoon, whispers began to spread throughout the building. Employees had overheard bits and pieces of the story, and soon everyone seemed to know about the janitor who had shouted in the parking lot. Some employees speculated, saying perhaps Marcus had overreacted. Others argued that his quick thinking may have saved someone from harm. The truth was still unclear, but one fact remained: Marcus, the man who was usually invisible, had suddenly become the center of attention. For Marcus, it was uncomfortable. He didn't like the spotlight. During his short lunch break, he sat quietly at his usual corner table, hoping no one would bother him. But a few employees approached him with kind words. One young man said, "I don't know exactly what happened out there, but thank you. You looked out for one of us." Marcus offered a polite smile and a nod, but inside, his heart was still unsettled. He kept thinking of Alina, his daughter. What if it had been her in that situation? What if no one had spoken up for her? The thought made him shiver. He knew he had done the right thing, but he also knew the company might not see it that way. After all, he was just a janitor, someone whose voice rarely carried weight in the polished halls of power. That evening, as the building grew quieter and the workers began to leave, Marcus continued with his tasks. He polished the last of the conference room tables and gathered the trash. His mind wandered as he worked, thinking about the SUV, the man's shadowed face, and the way the CEO had looked at him afterward. There was something in the CEO's eyes that Marcus couldn't quite place. The next morning, when Marcus arrived for his shift, the atmosphere felt different. People who usually walked past him without a glance now greeted him with curious looks. Some even whispered to one another as he passed. He didn't know what rumors were being spread, but it was clear his quiet act had rippled through the building. By midday, Marcus was asked to report to the HR office. His stomach tightened as he knocked on the door. Inside sat the HR manager, a kind woman who usually handled paperwork and orientation for new hires. She gestured for him to sit. "Marcus," she began gently, "the CEO asked us to get a full account of what happened yesterday. He was impressed with how you handled the situation, but we need to make an official record." Marcus nodded and repeated the story once again, careful to explain every detail he could remember. He didn't dramatize it, just spoke plainly about what he had seen and why he had acted. The HR manager listened intently, taking notes. When he finished, she smiled warmly. "You may not realize it," she said, "but your quick reaction could have made a huge difference." The CEO was very concerned about what happened. He sees this as more than just a simple incident. Marcus left the office feeling even more uncertain. What did that mean? More than a simple incident? He couldn't shake the feeling that his life was about to change in ways he hadn't expected. By the end of the day, the CEO himself appeared in the janitor's hallway. It was unusual, executives rarely came to this part of the building. Marcus quickly stood up from his cart, his hands instinctively folding in front of him. "I wanted to thank you personally," the CEO said. "Not many people would have spoken up the way you did. You may have saved that young woman from something very dangerous." Marcus shook his head humbly. "I only did what anyone would have done." The CEO's eyes softened. "No, Marcus. Not anyone. Most people would have ignored it or assumed it was none of their business. You acted. That matters." For the first time in years, Marcus felt truly seen, not as a janitor, not as a man in a uniform pushing a cart, but as a human being whose voice and actions had weight. The breaking point had come not in his struggle, but in the way his ordinary life had suddenly collided with extraordinary circumstances. What Marcus didn't yet realize was that this moment was only the spark. The real transformation, the part that would leave the company in shock, was still to come. The next morning, the building felt alive with an unusual energy. Marcus could sense it the moment he walked through the service entrance. Normally, people hurried past him with polite nods, barely noticing his presence. But today, he caught curious glances, half smiles, and even whispers. Something was different. Marcus tried to focus on his usual routine. He polished the lobby floors until they gleamed, straightened the chairs in the waiting area, and emptied the trash bins with the same quiet dedication he had shown for years. But no matter how hard he tried to stay in the background, he could feel the shift in the air. It was as though invisible eyes followed him wherever he went. By mid-morning, his supervisor approached him with a nervous smile. "Marcus, the CEO wants to see you." "Right away." Marcus blinked, surprised. He wasn't used to being summoned to the executive floor. His heart began to race as he wiped his hands on his uniform and followed his supervisor upstairs. The elevator ride felt endless. He couldn't help but think of Alina, his daughter, and how he had always told her to stay brave when facing something new. Now, he had to remind himself of the same lesson. When the doors opened, he stepped into a world that was unfamiliar to him. The executive floor was polished and quiet, with large glass windows that offered a sweeping view of the city skyline. He felt small in comparison to the space, his simple uniform a sharp contrast to the expensive suits and confident strides of the employees around him. The CEO's assistant greeted him warmly and led him into a large conference room. Inside, a group of managers and directors were seated around a long table. At the head sat the CEO himself, calm and commanding as always. Marcus froze for a moment, unsure if he should sit or stand, but the CEO gestured kindly. "Please, Marcus, take a seat." As Marcus sat, he felt every pair of eyes on him. He wasn't used to such attention, and for a moment, he wondered if he had done something wrong. But then the CEO began to speak. "Yesterday," the CEO said, his voice steady and clear, "something happened that none of us can ignore. One of our interns was approached in the parking lot by a stranger. It could have ended in disaster. but it didn't because one of our own saw what the rest of us missed. The room was silent as the CEO turned toward Marcus. Marcus, you acted quickly. You saw danger when no one else did. You spoke up when others would have stayed silent. Because of you, one of our young employees is safe today. And for that, we owe you more than words. Marcus felt his face flush. He wanted to shrink into his chair, but the CEO wasn't finished. Too often, we overlook the people who keep this company running behind the scenes. We see titles, we see job descriptions, but we forget that every person here is valuable. Yesterday was a reminder that leadership doesn't always wear a suit. Sometimes, leadership wears a janitor's uniform. A murmur of agreement spread around the room. Marcus's heart swelled with emotion. He had never imagined the CEO would speak about him in such a way. Then came the part that left him speechless. Effective immediately, the CEO continued, "We will be creating a new role in our building security department, and I would like Marcus to fill it. His instincts, courage, and commitment to this company make him the perfect person for the job. In addition, we will be setting up a scholarship fund for his daughter, to ensure she has every opportunity to succeed in her education." The room erupted in quiet applause. Marcus sat frozen, unable to believe what he was hearing. A scholarship for Alina? A new job in security? His mind spun with disbelief. When the applause died down, the CEO looked directly at him. "Marcus, this is not charity. This is recognition. You have shown us all what it means to protect and to lead. This company needs people like you not just to clean our halls, but to safeguard our people." Marcus's eyes stung with tears. He blinked quickly, trying to hold them back. "Sir," he said quietly, "I don't know what to say. I was just doing what felt right." The CEO smiled. "And that's exactly why you deserve this. Because you acted without thinking of yourself." For the rest of the day, the building buzzed with the news. Employees congratulated Marcus in the hallways, shaking his hand and thanking him for what he had done. Some even stopped to ask about his daughter, curious to learn more about the man they had overlooked for so long. That evening, when Marcus returned home, Alina ran into his arms as she always did. He held her tightly, overcome with emotion. "Daddy has something to tell you," he whispered, kneeling to meet her bright eyes. She tilted her head curiously. "What is it, Daddy?" Marcus smiled, his voice trembling with pride. "The people at work, they're going to help us. They're giving you a scholarship, sweetheart. That means when you grow up, you can go to any school you want." Alina's eyes widened. "Really? For me?" "For you," Marcus said, kissing her forehead. "Because you deserve every chance in the world." That night, after Alina went to bed, Marcus sat alone at the kitchen table, thinking about how much had changed in just 2 days. He thought about how invisible he had felt for so many years, and how suddenly the entire company had seen him for who he really was. Not just a janitor. Not just a single father. But a man who cared, who protected, and who believed in doing the right thing even when no one was watching. In his heart, Marcus knew something important: recognition wasn't about titles or money. It was about being valued for who you truly were. And now, for the first time in a long time, he felt that value shining back at him. The CEO's words echoed in his mind: "Leadership doesn't always wear a suit." Marcus understood now that leadership meant responsibility, courage, and heart. It meant standing up when it mattered most, no matter your position in life. And as he drifted off to sleep that night, Marcus whispered a quiet prayer of thanks, not for the promotion, not for the scholarship, but for the chance to show his daughter that doing the right thing always mattered. The days that followed brought a change Marcus had never expected in his lifetime. For years, he had walked the halls of the company almost unseen, pushing his cart quietly from one corner to another. But now, people stopped him, smiled at him, and even called his name. The same employees who once brushed past without notice now greeted him with warmth and respect. Some even went out of their way to thank him again for his quick action in the parking lot. At first, Marcus felt overwhelmed by the sudden attention. He wasn't used to being in the spotlight. He was a man who had lived simply, focusing on his work and his daughter, never asking for recognition. But slowly, he began to understand that this was not just about him. It was about something bigger. It was about showing people that courage and character could shine from any position, no matter how humble it seemed. In his new role with the security team, Marcus found himself learning new skills. Instead of pushing a cart of cleaning supplies, he now carried a badge and worked alongside trained professionals who were responsible for keeping the building safe. At first, he doubted himself. He worried that he didn't have the experience or the training to do the job well. But the team welcomed him warmly, and the CEO personally assured him that he was chosen not because of what was on his resume but because of who he was. "You can teach someone the rules," the CEO had said, "but you cannot teach instinct and heart. You already have those." Marcus worked hard to prove himself. He studied security procedures late at night after putting Alina to bed. He practiced with his team, asked questions, and never hesitated to admit when he didn't understand something. Over time, his confidence grew. The same instincts that had helped him protect the intern in the parking lot now guided him in his daily duties. He became known not only for his sharp eyes but also for his calm presence. Meanwhile, the scholarship fund for Alina became a beacon of hope in their small household. Marcus often sat with her at the kitchen table, helping with her homework, reminding her that education was the key to a brighter future. She would look up at him with her wide, curious eyes and say, "Daddy, one day I want to make you proud." Marcus would smile and reply, "You already do, sweetheart." Every single day. The story of the janitor who had shouted, "Don't get in the car," began to spread beyond the company walls. Local newspapers picked it up, sharing how a single father's quick action had prevented what could have been a terrible situation. Community groups invited Marcus to speak about responsibility and courage. At first, he was shy about standing in front of crowds, but then he thought of Alina watching him. He wanted to be an example for her, to show her that even ordinary people could inspire others. When Marcus spoke, he used simple words, just like the life he lived. He told people, "I'm no hero. I'm just a father." When you love someone deeply, you pay attention. You notice things. And when the time comes, you act. That's all I did. Those words touched people's hearts because they came from a place of truth. Back at the company, the CEO often told Marcus's story during leadership meetings. He would remind his managers, "Titles don't define greatness. Actions do. If a janitor can see what others overlook, then what excuse do we have for not paying attention to the people around us?" The story became a reminder for everyone in the company that respect and value should be given to every role, not just the ones at the top. Marcus never let the recognition change who he was. He remained humble, arriving early for his shifts, greeting people with a smile, and always ready to lend a helping hand. Sometimes, when the new interns arrived, he would go out of his way to talk to them, offering small words of encouragement. They respected him not only for what he had done but for the kindness he showed daily. At home, Alina grew more confident too. She often told her classmates, "My dad works at a big company, and he helps keep everyone safe." She carried herself with pride, knowing her father was more than his job title. He was a man of courage and heart. One evening, after a long day, Marcus sat on the balcony of their apartment, watching the city lights flicker. Alina sat beside him, eating a bowl of ice cream, her legs swinging off the chair. "Daddy," she asked suddenly, "why did you yell that day?" Marcus looked at her, his expression soft. "Because, sweetheart, sometimes in life you don't get time to think. You just know what's right, and you do it. I thought of you. I imagined if you were in that same moment, I would want someone to protect you. So I spoke up. Alina leaned against his arm, thoughtful. So being brave is like being someone else's protector. Marcus smiled. Exactly. Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you care enough to do the right thing even when you are. Those simple words stayed with Alina, shaping the way she saw her father and the world. As months passed, the company's culture shifted in subtle but important ways. Employees who once ignored the staff behind the scenes now greeted them by name. Executives took the time to thank the people who worked in maintenance, security, and cleaning. Marcus's story had opened their eyes. It wasn't just about one incident, it was about seeing the value in everyone around them. For Marcus, the biggest reward wasn't the promotion or the applause. It was the lesson his daughter was learning right before his eyes, that integrity and love mattered more than status. He knew she would carry that lesson into her own future, wherever it led her. One Friday afternoon, the CEO called Marcus into his office. As they sat across from each other, the CEO said, "Marcus, when I think about leadership, I think of you. Not because of a title or a role, but because you remind people that every voice matters. You've taught this company more than I ever could with speeches or policies." Marcus felt humbled by the words. He shook his head gently. "I'm just trying to be the best father I can be. Everything I do for her." The CEO smiled. "And that's exactly why you've become a symbol here. Thank you." That night, walking home, Marcus thought about how far life had brought him. From long nights of scrubbing floors to standing before executives and being honored for his courage, the journey had been unexpected. Yet, he knew he wouldn't have changed a single step. Because through it all, one truth had guided him: doing the right thing, no matter how small, always matters. And as the city lights glowed around him, Marcus held Alina's hand tightly, knowing that their future was brighter than ever, not because of recognition or rewards, but because of love, courage, and the belief that even ordinary people could make an extraordinary difference.